y'all. This is your CajunStork here. Today we are going to be talking about how to become a midwife. Normally on our Midwife Mondays, I make videos for mamas for tips and tricks on how to have a better birth experience, but I have been getting a ton of requests from people asking about how to become a midwife, what type of midwife I am. And so today I want to tackle all things midwifery. So if you're a midwifery student or aspiring midwife, I really hope you'll stay tuned today, and I hope that you'll find this information useful to you. So my name is Midwife Kyra, and I am a certified professional midwife and a licensed midwife practicing in Lafayette, Louisiana. I am a birth center midwife, but was also trained to be a home birth midwife. I will talk a little bit more about my story and how I got here in a few minutes, about my licensure and things like that. In the meantime though, let me know, shout out in the comments where you're from. And if you've ever had a midwife birth, I'd like to know that. That's really great. And whatever questions you guys have, post them as we go, and I'll go ahead and tackle questions at the end of the video. Okay, so again, my name is Midwife Kyra, a practicing midwife in Louisiana. I started midwifery very young. Most of the time, midwives are much older and more settled before they start midwifery. For me, I was probably 19 years old when I started midwifery. And there were three moments that moved me into wanting to be a midwife. First of all, I always wanted to work with pregnant women. Midwifery for me is not even about the babies, it's about pregnant women. I don't know what it is. I thought I was gonna be an OB. And then I saw the Discovery Health Channel, the show Birthday, where there was a midwife delivering a baby in a birth center in Florida during a tropical storm with no electricity. And for some reason I was like, I want to do that. But now I realize I really love having electricity at births, and I really don't like delivering in tropical storms. But that was kind of my first introduction to midwifery. And I remember thinking, is midwife like still a thing? Later, my dog had puppies, and I was probably about 16 years old at this point. My dog had puppies, and one of the puppies was born not breathing. And although I have no CPR training in pets at the time, I did mouth the snout and breathe life into this puppy, and it just spoke to my soul. I knew for a fact I was going to work in birth from that moment. And when I started college, I started as a nursing student, assuming and being told that I had to be a nurse midwife to practice in Louisiana, to later find out I didn't have to be a nurse midwife, that there was another type of licensed midwife in Louisiana that practiced out of hospital. So the third moment that really moved me into midwifery was in nursing school. Our instructor was giving a scenario about a situation that she was at the hospital and during a birth, and the mother started to crash and the doctor wasn't in the room, and the nurse kind of stood there and paged the doctor to come in and help. And I actually walked out of that nursing class literally having a panic attack in the hallway, thinking, I can't be that person that is standing in the room watching an emergency and not have the skills to deal with it. And so immediately started pursuing licensed midwifery, which I'll talk about in a minute, what that means and how that's different than nursing and nurse midwifery. But that's a little bit of my history. So I, again, am a licensed midwife in the state of Louisiana and a certified professional midwife, which means I practice outside of the hospital. Okay, so moving on. Let's see, slideshow. Oh, no, not like that. Okay, next. Hey everybody watching, let us know where you're from. I'm hoping we have some future midwives here today. That would be amazing, we need more. In Louisiana, we have, I think, maybe 11 licensed midwives, so we definitely need more midwives. Okay, so let's get started. Why midwives? So I'm hoping the camera isn't backwards when I show this to you guys. But this is one of the examples of why I love midwifery. There are two babies here. One is being picked because we think it's ripe, and the other is waiting to be caught when it's time. I love the saying that midwives have very skilled hands, but we know how to sit on them. And waiting on babies and catching babies is just a prime example of us sitting on our hands. Why do women choose midwives? First of all, it's just a completely different level of personalized care. I always find it interesting that when we're in our first pregnancy and we're on our way to our OBGYN's office, because that's kind of what everyone does, we automatically, innately expect midwifery care. Meaning we expect the doctor to sit with us and spend some time with us and ask us about ourselves and our family. And for the birth, we expect the doctor to kind of labor sit. And I don't know about you, but I was pretty disappointed when I showed up for my birth and was sat by a nurse and the doctor came in, delivered the baby and left maybe 15 minutes. And my prenatal appointments, I waited for an hour and got to spend maybe 4 to 7 minutes with my doctor. And it just felt impersonal. I was a number. I couldn't bring my baby to my postpartum appointments. Like, that's absurd. Midwifery care is completely different. Midwives devote 30 to 60 minutes of one-on-one, undivided attention to you. It's a very personalized prenatal appointments where we not only get to know our mamas, but we get to know their families, their children, their children's names, their previous birth experiences, and all the things that make them a whole picture of who they are. And not just that, we get to know their babies and their bellies too. And so when baby's not acting right in birth, baby's acting up a little bit, as I like to say, we pick up on that because we know that this baby doesn't typically act this way. And this time together that we spend prenatally helps us form intimate relationships with our clients. And like I said, that's something that I think we as women naturally seek, is these deep relationships with our healthcare provider, because pregnancy is special. It's a special time in our lives that we don't get to do very often. And we want to be treated that way. I really believe that. We want to be seen and felt and heard. And midwives do that through quality time with our clients. If I did the math correctly, I think we spend about 12 hours of time together while you're pregnant, so that when you show up for your birth, you know your midwife on a personal level at your birth and your postpartum, so there's never a stranger. Now, on a bigger scale, many countries around the world have midwives attending births as their primary provider. And in fact, the 6 countries in the world with the lowest perinatal mortality, that means babies who are dying either in the womb or immediately after the birth, like during or after the birth. The 6 countries with the lowest perinatal mortality are attended by midwives 70% of the time in their births. So statistics are in favor of midwives attending births that provide better outcomes. In the US, just as an example, only 5% of births, or so, about 5%, is attended by midwives. And our perinatal mortality is alarmingly high. I think we place 26th. Like, it's really bad. And our country spends some of the most amount of money in childbirth than any other country on the planet. And yet we have some of the worst outcomes. So I always like to say, dads think hospital births are the safest for their healthy wives because, well, we have all of this fancy equipment, we should be using it. But really, in a normal, uncomplicated birth, that fancy equipment really tends to cause more complications than it's helping. And so, as I said earlier, when I was wondering, do midwives still exist? Yeah, midwives exist. And in fact, midwifery care is on the rise in the United States. Although currently, about 95% of births are done in the hospital in the US. Of the out-of-hospital births, birth centers and home births, 93% of those births are attended by midwives. Birth centers are on the rise. When I started midwifery and I was being trained in a birth center setting for a little while, there was 197 birth centers in the country, in the United States at that time. Currently, we have 375, and they're just more and more popping up. In fact, you guys probably already know, we opened a second natural birth house location in Covington, Louisiana. So now Louisiana has 4 freestanding birth centers in the state: Shreveport, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and Covington. So that's really exciting, and midwifery is on the rise. But we need more midwives. We need more midwives, not just because women deserve it, but also for the midwives who are serving to continue to serve for years to come. Okay, so what's the difference between a birth center midwife and a home birth midwife? Well, in Louisiana, and I know this isn't the same for all the states out there, but in Louisiana, it's the same. Same midwife, same license, same equipment. But a birth center in Louisiana is just basically, it's your home birth at my house, is how I like to put it. Not literally my house, but you know, my office. There is a study that came out in January of this year. It's called Birth Settings in America. And it said that birth centers are a good level 1 basic care for low-risk healthy women with term, meaning past 37 weeks, head down, single babies, so not twins, who are expected to have an uncomplicated birth. This is a great plan for low-risk healthy women. In fact, ACOG, who kind of oversees birth in America, as long as a birth center is within 30 minutes of a hospital that can perform a C-section, ACOG's all thumbs up for birth centers that are within that range, as long as the moms are term with a head-down baby with only one baby in there, and they're expected to have a low-risk birth. Something I really want to say at this point too is we're talking about hospital births a little bit and how dads feel like the safety of having that equipment and all of those fancy equipment, all that fancy equipment makes it better. But in 2018, the World Health Organization said this, and I'm gonna quote. It says, it was a committee for preventable maternal and fetal deaths. They said, the experience of childbirth care cannot be separated from clinical outcomes. It is not a secondary consideration, but a very important aspect of ensuring high quality childbirth care. And the experience of care and the outcome, although closely associated, should not be separated from clinical outcomes. So what this means is we're acknowledging as a whole, as a community of birthing women in this country. Thank goodness it's finally happening. January of 2020, y'all. We are acknowledging that experiences in childbirth and their effects on post-traumatic stress disorder, postpartum depression, mistreatment and birth are being documented, and they are impacting families long-term, long after the birth itself. And that we need to start focusing not only on good outcomes, but also on the experience. And that's where midwives like you come in. So, a few fun facts. The CDC, in comparing hospital birth versus out-of-hospital birth, in 2017, neonatal mortality, this is deaths of babies. Hospital birth is 0.55% per, I'm sorry, not 0.55%, 0.55 per 1,000 births. Birth center with a midwife is 0.59, so it's essentially the same. However, if you look at some of the documents written, they will say it's greatly increased because 0.55 per 1,000 and 0.59 per 1,000, in my opinion, is not that different. And American Academy of Accreditation of Birth Centers in America in 2011 said the neonatal mortality is 0.03 for birth centers and 0.04 for hospitals. So in 2011, it's actually better. NICU admissions, though, this is going to blow your mind. NICU admissions between 2007 and 11, 3.1 hospital births per 1,000 hospital births were admitted, whereas 1.1 babies born out of hospital were admitted to NICU. And I see this all the time. I tell you, if there's one thing, out of all the things midwives do really well, resuscitation is one of the most beautiful things midwives do really well out of hospital, because we can do it with babies still on the umbilical cord, skin to skin with the mom, touching mom and having their name called and hearing mom's calming voice while they're going through a scary experience. And because of that, they recover like this. Like, babies want to be here. And so we very rarely have NICU admissions out of hospital. But the facts get even better when we talk about moms. Like, okay, babies have almost equivalent outcomes in hospital and out of hospital, but moms have tremendously different outcomes. Oh, it's backwards, or at least it's backwards on my end. So let me read it to you in case you're seeing it backwards. The same study in 2020 said that low-risk women with term head-down babies. C-section rate in the hospital, 31.9%. Out of hospital with a planned midwife, less than 6%. I can speak for that. That is pretty consistent across the board. So in Louisiana, the 2 hospitals locally, Lafayette General and Women's and Children's, their C-section rate's about 40%. Y'all, that's almost every other mom who walks into the hospital has a C-section. And that's not the case in midwifery care. I mean, I think we might have 2 C-sections a year or less. It's very, very rare. Vaginal tearing, you know, that's really important to us as women. 22% in the hospital in this study. I think it's much more than that. With a planned midwife, 7.9%. Almost nothing. And I'd venture to say it's even lower than that. I probably do a laceration repair every 2 or 3 months. It's just not very common to tear out of hospital. Okay, infection. 2.6% in the hospital, 0.7% out of hospital. And labor induction. So we all know about the moms who had to get on Pitocin for their births. And we always wonder if it's necessary. 25.7% in the hospital, and personally I think that's a gross underestimate for Louisiana. 1.4% of out-of-hospital birthers need labor induction. So like, what happens if we birth in a safe, calm, peaceful environment with people we know who are not strangers, people who trust the process? What happens if we're allowed to eat and drink in labor and work with our body's ability to give birth instead of restricting food and nourishment in labor to prepare our bodies for surgery? What happens is beautiful things. Women give birth vaginally most of the time. It's just incredible. It's incredible. I wish you guys knew the things that midwives know about birth. So many people in our culture think that when women have good births, it was luck. And it's not luck. It's your choice of birth location and care provider. Okay, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Last one, breastfeeding initiation. In the hospital, 72%. With a planned midwife, 94.5%. In my practice, 100%. 100% of my moms initiate breastfeeding, and almost all of them are still breastfeeding at 6 weeks, except for extremely rare circumstances. So, I hope that validates why you want to become a midwife. We are helping women. We are helping the state with their terrible statistics, and we're helping this country. So, what is midwifery? I could say so many things, but I'm just going to leave it at midwives focus on high touch, low technology. So where physicians spend more money in childbirth in America with ultrasounds, lab work. In fact, I know doctors who never touch a mom's belly and use ultrasounds at every appointment to check on her baby. And routinely we use ultrasounds as midwives once to twice per pregnancy. So this says a lot on saving money, but also it shows the experience of midwives with their hands. I can tell you if your baby's head down or breech at 36 weeks by touching your belly with these hands. And what's even more amazing is that I don't need to use these hands to do a vaginal exam in labor on most circumstances to tell you whether or not you're going to have a baby or you're being admitted or sent home. Like, we have very skilled hands as midwives, but we know how to sit on them. We know how to use them and when not to use them and overuse them. So I like to say today's midwifery is traditional midwifery, or at least CPM midwifery, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. Traditional midwifery values with a modern education, modern expectations, gold standard prenatal care. What do people think midwifery is? Well, number one, everyone thinks being a midwife is glamorous. I wish I'd taken some pictures of myself the last couple of weeks to show you how glamorous midwifery is not. And if you ask any of our husbands, they can say the same thing. Midwifery is not glamorous, you guys. This is not the job that you think it is. Midwifery is not all about babies. It's not always fun. It's not always a big happy family. And even good births sometimes women have trauma that they have to work through. And we have to be there to stand in that space and help them with that. A lot of people also think because midwifery is a calling for midwives, that it's fun, it's easy. Don't get me wrong, I love my job. It's never boring, it's never unexciting, but it's hard. Midwifery is hard. And if you're a friend of mine watching this video, you know how hard it is to schedule times with me to go have coffee, or hey, let's have a phone call, and I cancel last minute because I'm either on my way to a birth or I'm recovering from a birth. When I started midwifery, the midwife who I tried to apprentice with, I did end up apprenticing with, I was young, I had a baby on my hip, I was breastfeeding, and she spent an entire afternoon trying to talk me out of it, and I was really angry. Like, how can you try and talk me out of being a midwife? Like, this state needs more midwives. But here I am at 33, been practicing since 2013, and I understand why. There is a huge sacrifice to being a midwife, and I don't expect any of you guys to take that lightly when you pursue this career. I could go on and on about that, but I'm going to try and stay on topic today. But I just want you to know, first of all, midwifery is not glamorous. You lose a lot of sleep. There's a lot of weird things about midwifery, which I planned on talking about today, but I'm going to go ahead and skip it for now. But most importantly, every single person you run into from the moment you decide to become a midwife will tell you their birth story, whether it's good or bad, and normally they're bad. So you have to be prepared to like hold this space and advocate for women through this job. It's very interesting. Hard to maintain relationships with your friends. I would love to do a video with my husband and our midwife Ashley and Covington's husband on what it's like to be married to a midwife, because that's very challenging too. And if you're considering midwifery, I really would encourage you to speak to if you're married and considering midwifery, I'd encourage you to speak to a married midwifery couple and just talk to them about the challenges and make sure you guys are ready for that, especially if you're of childbearing age. You know, you need a lot of good support, a lot of good family support. Your husband has to work a job that he can be flexible, because sometimes you have to leave at 2 in the morning and you may not come back for 40 hours. Anyway, okay, so who makes good midwives? I thought it would be funny to talk about some of the astrological signs. Did I say it right? I went to a birth last night, so sorry. Okay, so I asked my friend Annalisa, if you could name 4 signs that would make good midwives, what would you say? And she said, Capricorns, which is me. Capricorns are business oriented and are able to be objective in high stress situations. If you can handle high stress situations and think clearly, you're on the right track. If you're the kind of person where you're in a high stress situation and you can't think clearly, you want to run out the room, midwifery may not be right for you. Because although most of the time birth works without us doing anything except being in the space, holding space, when there is a birth emergency, you have to think clearly and you have to act fast on what little or lots of sleep you've had the night before. You have to be good on your feet. So Capricorns make good midwives. Virgos are detail-oriented and very good caretakers. So midwives have to be humble and willing to listen and sit and be in a woman's space. There's a lot of emotional connection that goes on with midwifery and caretaking. Cancers, also incredibly caring and devoted to their clients. So I actually know a midwife who delivered a baby shortly after Hurricane Laura right outside of Lake Charles. Was that 3 weeks ago? That's devotion. I'd actually love to know what her sign is. If you're watching this, I'd love for you to post what your sign is. Midwives are devoted to their clients. It's 2 in the morning, you're exhausted, you're hungry, and your mom is about to have a baby, and we are just there. We're there with her. That's just in our spirit. And Scorpios. Scorpios are not afraid of the hard stuff in life, and they fiercely protect their clients. So what did you gather from this? Good midwives are detail-oriented. They're good in high-stress situations. They're detail-oriented. They're good caretakers. They're devoted to their clients. They're not afraid of the hard stuff. They can stand in front of physicians who think they're like witches and give a report on a client needing a transfer, or make requests of the hospital staff to respect our client's right to choose or have informed consent for something that we know is not standard of care at the local hospital. Or speak up when a doctor is about to cut our client an episiotomy that we know she doesn't need. She just needs more time. We have to be able to juggle clinic, birth, postpartum care, and accepting new clients into care all in the same day. And at the end of all of this, I come home and I'm a mom of 4 kids and a wife. So you need, and now CajunStork, like I'm all the things, and you will be all the things. So if this sounds like it's too much for you, it might be too much for you. But if you are not intimidated by this, hang in there, because I'm going to talk to you now about how to become the midwife you want to be and which midwife to choose, which midwife route to choose. Okay, so in the States, there's technically 2 types of midwifery, although there's a third. I'm not going to talk about the third today. CPM versus CNM. So CPM is Certified Professional Midwife. CNM is Certified Nurse Midwife. Those are the 2 main branches of midwifery. From there, you also have licensed midwives, which, as you heard at the beginning of the video, I'm a CPM and an LM. Licensed midwives are typically licensed by their state to practice midwifery, whereas CPM is a national certification that speaks for your qualifications to practice midwifery. There's lay midwives, which is actually not a thing, you guys. I mean, I guess it is, but no, like lay midwife is just this ugly derogatory term that insinuates like midwives are untrained, uneducated, have no experience, they just started attending births. So if you're watching this and you use the term lay midwife, please drop that term. And midwives spend a lot of time and money getting educated these days, and the term lay midwife is extremely outdated. There's direct entry midwives, which is a portion of certified professional midwives, and we're going to talk about that process, direct entry certified professional midwives, in just a minute. And last one is community midwives. This is like a woman in her church setting who's attended a lot of births, or maybe in a community setting who's just been to a lot of births, and she's attending births with no licensure, no certification, no regulation, things like that. So CNM, let's talk about Certified Nurse Midwives. So Certified Nurse Midwives are overseen by the American College of Nurse Midwives. In Louisiana, nurse midwives do not have a lot of autonomy. In fact, they're required to practice beneath a physician who writes them orders or standing orders and basically gives them permission on how they can and cannot practice. They can practice out of hospital if they can find a doctor to write them standing orders for that, but there's only one doctor in the state who'll do that because he owns that birth center. The rest of the nurse midwives in the state practice as labor and delivery nurses with a master's degree, or labor and delivery nurses, nurse midwives in a hospital setting practicing as mini OBGYNs. So let me try that again. In Lafayette, Louisiana, nurse midwives are practicing as master degree labor and delivery nurses. But in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, Louisiana, nurse midwives are actually practicing like mini obstetricians. So they can attend natural births, they can induce labors, they can attend epidural births. I've heard that maybe they could attend, they can attend VBACs and maybe even breaches. I'm not completely sure about that. But they have a lot more obstetrical-like qualities in this state and less out-of-hospital birth experience outside of that one birth center in the state with CNMs. Now, right here next door in Texas, nurse midwives and certified professional midwives all practice in birth center settings or home birth, and it's no big deal. But in Louisiana, that's just not the way it is. It is noteworthy, however, that the United States is the only country in the world that utilizes the title nurse midwife. And in fact, in countries like the Netherlands, where midwifery has been long established, midwives who were first nurses and are now going to midwifery school actually lose points for being a nurse or having a nursing background, because nurses are trained to follow orders, but midwives are trained to think independently. But one of the benefits of CNM, you enjoy secure legal status nationwide. You can pretty much practice freely in every state. You get shift work, which is awesome. And you get paid pretty well, but typically you work for someone else unless you own a birth center, which you can't in Louisiana. And it does seem more glamorous when you're able to be hired and there's more midwives to work with. And CNMs often work more often with physicians. Sometimes they even work in physicians' offices. They don't attend births, but they're their like office midwife, which is great. Still midwifery, it's just more of obstetrical side of birth and less traditional midwifery. Now CPMs, this is what I am. I'm a certified professional midwife. I see Jessica's question, CNM can't work in a birth center. In Louisiana, CNMs can work in a birth center if there's a physician to write them standing orders. There's only one physician in the state who does this because he owns the birth center in Baton Rouge. I have not met another physician in the state who is willing to put his neck out like that and have CNMs out of hospital. CPMs, however, we are autonomous. We are the boss of our own practice. We don't have prescriptive authority, so we don't write prescriptions. We do have to refer out for things like that. So if a mom has a bladder infection, she goes to a walk-in clinic or her GP, or if we have a good relationship, she can even see the OBGYN she normally would have seen if she wasn't using midwifery care. In this state, CPMs practice out of hospital exclusively. We have permission to practice in hospital and in doctor's offices. I worked in a doctor's office for 3 years, but we all practice home birth or birth center births in this state. It's the same midwife with the same training and the same equipment, the same licensure laws, but a birth center or a home birth, that's really just kind of the biggest difference. CPMs are regulated by the North American Registry of Midwives. This is called NARM. And I'm going to go through NARM very closely with you in just a minute, but this is their website, narm.org. And if you're considering becoming a CPM, this is where you start. North American Registry of Midwives, how to become a CPM. There are 2 ways to become a CPM. There's an education way, and there's still apprenticeship in many states. Unlike certified nurse midwives, certified professional midwives don't have legal licensure in every state. Some states it's illegal, some states it's illegal, meaning there's no laws for it or against it. You just have to hope you don't get brought to court. In Louisiana, CPMs are perfectly legal, and in fact, we have quite a bit of autonomy here, in my opinion. If you're wanting to go to midwifery school, the website is meacschools.org, MEAC. These are accredited midwifery schools that offer everything from an associate's to a certificate, associate's, bachelor's, or master's degree program in midwifery. And if you see, I hope this isn't backwards for you guys, but it is showing backwards on my camera. This is a list of the schools here. And what's great about these MEAC schools is not all of them are in person. There are a couple of online only options in here. So you can do online education and then the apprenticeship model with someone locally, which is what I did. I did a certificate program in Aviva College for Maternal Infant Health. And then I did an apprenticeship with both a home birth midwife and a birth center midwife before I got my license. This was back before going to midwifery school was cool or required. So back then, getting a bachelor's degree was like, there was like 1 or 2 schools that did it. But now I think there's like 7. So yes, Evie, I will post the links. I'm actually going to post this on YouTube, I think tomorrow, and I'll be posting all the links to all these sites below. And I'll probably turn this into a blog as well. So you'll have all of these websites on there. I love the Midwives College of Utah. If you're looking for a good school, I looked into going back over there just because I think their program is amazing. And it's distance-based, which I really love. So if you're looking for a good school that's distance-based, that's a great one. What about the apprenticeship model? So I personally think that midwives, this is not going to be a popular opinion. I personally think that today's midwives should go to midwifery school. I think there's a huge benefit and level of professionalism that comes with any kind of midwifery formal accredited education. And as midwifery moves into the future and we continue to be accepted more as qualified healthcare providers, I think this is going to be an important requirement for us. And I realize if you're a midwife watching this, you may not agree with that opinion. This is my opinion, and I think it's important. So if you have the option to go to midwifery school, I strongly encourage you to. However, some people have been birth assistants for years, already registered nurses, been doulas for years, childbirth educators. And really, they just need that basic midwifery foundation, but they already have all of the understanding of the other stuff. And so in that case, an apprenticeship model may be a good model for you. So if you're on NARM's website, the North American Registry of Midwives, you would be going under PEP, P-E-P. This is PEP application to become apprentice-based midwife. You'd find a preceptor, which is a registered preceptor like myself, and you would become an apprentice. Good news and bad news about apprenticeship. Good news is that you're going to learn some amazing skills, and there's nothing better than hands-on experience in birth. And you're going to see a ton of normal birth. So whereas most physicians and RNs very rarely see a normal birth unfold without interventions before they're allowed to practice, you're going to see so much of this as an apprentice, and it's just an amazing thing. But the downside is that you're going to be doing a lot of free work. My apprenticeship lasted, I think, 4 or 5 years. By the time I got my midwifery license, I had attended about 100 births, most of them for free or by donation if a client wanted to donate something to me. So not only to become a midwife, you not only have to have a lot of family support at home, you're going to have to figure out your finances, because you can't really have another job unless you have a flexible job where you can work from home on your own schedule and attend births for free. So that's just really something else to consider. And childcare. A lot of midwives have to pay for childcare too. Okay, so do y'all have questions about CPM versus CNM? Questions about the process? Well, actually, let me touch on that real quick. To become a CPM through the PEP process, you have to attend a certain number of clinical experiences, and you can find that on their website, NARM's website, on how to become a CPM. And it lays out entry-level PEP applicants. This is also called direct entry midwifery. NARM has separated it into phases to make it a little bit easier to submit. The short version is phase 1, you observe 10 births in any capacity. Your friend's birth, your family member's birth, a doula birth, a doctor lets you attend clinic with him for a week. Phase 2, you attend births under supervision as an assistant. You attend 20 births, 25 prenatals, 20 newborn exams, and 10 postpartum visits, which doesn't sound like a lot, but every midwifery apprentice attends way more than these, because, 20 births is just not enough. Phase 3, clinicals as primary under supervision. So this means that you, as the apprentice, are now running the show and the midwife is assisting you. So primary under supervision, you have to lead 75 prenatal visits, including 20 initial visits, 20 newborn exams, 40 postpartum exams on mamas post-birth, and 20 births. Only 2 of them can have transported to the hospital. So yeah, that'll hold some midwives back for a little while. I think, the transfer rate from out-of-hospital birth is very low, but it's such a bummer when you're 1 birth away and you have because usually they come in 3s. You'll have 3 transports in a row, and that's just kind of a disappointment. Realistically, if you're working in a slow practice, like the apprenticeship I worked in, where she did a birth or 2 a month, it took me 4 to 5 years. In the volume of practice that I have currently, it's not unrealistic to think a midwife couldn't be licensed in 2 years. We are extremely busy. Thank goodness we're extremely busy. Women are finally seeking out a hospital birth thanks to COVID on a mass scale. And I think every midwife in the country is busy. So if there's ever a time to pursue midwifery, now's the time. We need help. We need students. We need more midwives. And women are flocking to midwives for that good quality care during the COVID crisis. Okay, let's see. I saw some questions and I don't know how to scroll up on them. Here we go. For the apprenticeship, Catherine Stephen asks, for the apprenticeship, do you have to attend free births? If I'm understanding that question correctly. So you do schooling and apprenticeship when you're doing the MEAC accreditation method. The births that you attend while in school or the PEP method are typically unpaid. Unless you have a midwife who's willing to pay you as her birth assistant, but you'd have to be pretty skilled for that. So yes, you are doing unpaid births in addition to paying for school. Let's see what else. Yes, I'll share those websites. I already answered that one. Let's see. What happens if you are currently in nursing school and now you're considering CPM? I did that. That was me. 3 years in nursing school and jumped ship in an afternoon to certified professional midwifery. It's the best decision I ever made. CPM in Louisiana is pretty challenging. My town, I've had really good luck with physicians and relationships with the hospitals, but I can't speak for every town in that regard. And I like practicing autonomously. My personality, I don't really like being told what to do. And I like being in charge. I'm a Capricorn. I like being in charge of my clients and my practice. And because of that, that works for me. If you really just want to do midwifery and you want a good job, CNM is the way to go. Certified nurse midwives have job security. They typically have an employer, which means they can get a 401k and they can get health insurance and they get shift work. I'm an entrepreneur in spirit. Midwifery is one of the many businesses that I run, and I love it. It's just made for me. Let's see, Sindel says, I've already started my search in choosing an accredited online school. Which one would you suggest? I love Midwives College of Utah. I mentioned that earlier. I love it. I would consider going back myself just because I think their program looks amazing. I love the way that they're organized, and it's largely, I think it's all online based, which is awesome. What is direct entry? So direct entry midwifery is the PEP apprenticeship process. Those three terms are pretty much interchangeable. The PEP process, apprentice, and direct entry midwifery. It just means I didn't go to midwifery school, I'm only trained by apprenticeship model. That's direct entry midwifery. Most states who have licensing, even though you're a direct entry midwife, you still have to have some basic foundational classes, nutrition, science, anatomy, physiology, CPR, neonatal resuscitation. Those things are required in just about every state. And then you become a CPM, certified professional midwife, through the direct entry process, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think I've tackled all the questions. If you guys have any more questions, I'll give you like another 30 seconds here to post them below so I can tackle them. I'm gonna post this video on YouTube so you can watch it again in the next couple days. Happy to take more questions throughout the afternoon. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Don't forget to watch our YouTube channel. It's YouTube/CajunStork. And share this video with someone who might make a really good midwife, because we need them in Louisiana. We need midwives. All right, well, thanks for watching this Midwife Monday. I hope that tackled all of your becoming a midwife questions. And I'll see you guys next Midwife Monday. Bye-bye.